Hi guys, welcome back to another video. This is Lemon Cat Podfic, and today I am going to be reading a Bandit to Join 2, a one-shot by me, Kitty Cat, over on AO3. It will be a Kyoka Jirou and Koji Koda fic, and it's no archive warnings apply, so there's no triggers for that. Summary is, when Kyoka meets her classmate's pet rat, things slowly accelerate. The quiet Koda is sweet and caring, easy to talk to. He's quiet, unlike her loud group. So she isn't too surprised to find herself developing feelings for him. But how is she supposed to handle those feelings for the quietest boy in the background? And would he even feel the same? This was one of my works done through a spinner that just chose two characters for me to put together, so hopefully you guys like it all right. Kyoka yawned, stretching out into Mina. Tired? She asked, looking down at her with raised eyebrows. Kyoka grumbled something, burying her face in her hands. I regret last night, she whined. Mina laughed, leaning back onto the couch as she picked up her phone to scroll. You're the one who decided to stay up until 4 a.m. working on your music. I didn't even finish, Kyoka complained, still mumbling into her arm. Couldn't figure out what the right sound was that I wanted. Mina laughed, her focus on her phone. You never can. Just go take a nap. Kyoka huffed, pulling her arm away from her face, wincing at the bright light. No. She dragged the word out as she squinted up at her friend. If I go to sleep now, I won't be able to sleep tonight, and then I'll be up all night again. She tried to explain, but Mina didn't respond, her phone's audio quiet. Kyoka didn't move, staring up at the ceiling of the dorm common room as her head pounded. They were the only two people in there at that moment, everyone else resting in different areas. Midoriya and Bakugou were both chilling in the infirmary because they had decided to fight, yet again, and the rest of the squad was preparing some cheesy get-well prank for when Bakugou got back. The two of them had very quickly left the boys to handle it themselves. Neither was risking getting blown to pieces. Mina was no help, though, scrolling through her phone absent-mindedly as Kyoka stared up. She could go work on her song. She had been for the past 2 months, so what was a little more time? Editing and deleting and editing. She wasn't even sure if it could count as a song anymore, the melody so burned into her brain from constant playing. But she needed to finish it soon. She groaned, sitting up slowly. Yawning, she rubbed at her eyes as she squinted in the light. I'm gonna go to the bathroom, she muttered, Mina humming in acknowledgement. She didn't bother turning on the light to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. She used the tiny light from under the door to make her way to the sink, sighing. She had been trying to go without added caffeine for the past year, but an energy drink sounded amazing right now. Instead, she turned on the faucet to cold, letting the water run into the sink. She splashed some onto her face, shivering as it trailed down her neck, definitely messing up her eyeliner. She had gotten the cheap kind after the waterproof stuff had stained one of her guitars, though her face that stared back, bags accentuated by the dripping pink eyeliner, did nothing to help. She sat on the toilet lid, rubbing at her face with a paper towel as she debated her options. After the fight, Sensei had let them free for the rest of the day. That would mean tomorrow would be living hell for all of them. She needed her sleep tonight, but she didn't know if she could make it that long. Something squeaked near her, and she jumped, plugging in a jack on the wall on instinct. There was a small pitter-patter, almost like dripping water nearby. She looked to the sink, the faucet securely turned off. No, the sound was more consistent, more animalistic. Hey, buddy, she whispered, pulling her jack out of the wall as she watched little whiskers appear from a miniature hole in the wall. The rat stuck its face out, its whiskers twitching as it watched her warily. She reached a hand out, expecting the white rat to run back into the wall. However, it squeaked again, running at her quickly. She shrieked in surprise, pulling her feet onto the bull seat as it ran at her. It paused for a second before backing up and taking a running leap onto the edge of the seat. She screamed as it clambered its way up, its pudgy stomach holding it down. She raced to the other side of the dark room, pointing a jack threateningly at the small rodent. It sniffed the air, sitting back on its paws as it watched her closely. "Oh," she whispered, the light catching on the small ribbon around the animal's neck. "You're one of Koda's, aren't you?" she asked. The rat nodded, and she blinked in surprise, crouching down to its eye level from across the room. "You scared me," she whispered, very much awake now. The rat chittered, bobbing its head up and down as it stared at her. The little thing jumped off the toilet, approaching her slower than the first time. "Hey, little fella," she said, laughing slightly. "You here to keep me awake?" It chittered, sticking its nose out to her hand. She turned her hand around, and it crawled up into her palm, its feet tickling her skin. "Sorry for the scare," she muttered, holding the creature to her chest as she stood up. "Wanna accompany me for a bit?" The rat bobbed again, and she laughed, cupping it gently. "Let me go see if I can find you something." She opened the door, shutting it quietly behind her. Mina didn't look up from the couch, muttering something to herself. Kyoka ignored her, continuing on to the kitchen, no longer squinting at the bright lights. "What do you want to eat?" she asked, the little thing that used her paws in walking to climb up onto her shoulder. She laughed slightly, pulling her hair back into a ponytail so it didn't touch the rat. She pulled out cereal, grabbing a bowl as well. She poured herself some, setting some on a separate plate for the rat as she got the milk out. She carefully balanced the paper towel on the bowl, putting the spoon in her mouth. She felt the rat grab hold a little more as she walked to the elevator, pushing the button with her elbow. "Don't tell Ida," she mumbled, the spoon still in her mouth. The rat squeaked in response, and she laughed, adjusting her stance as the elevator moved up. Ida had banned them from taking dishes to the room after Denki had magically materialized half of their sets one day. As long as she snuck it down after Ida's bedtime, though, it didn't matter much. The elevator opened, and she stepped out, carefully holding the dish. Something moved out of the corner of her eye, and she jumped, almost dropping the bowl. A large hand grabbed it, helping her balance it as she sighed in relief. "Thank you," she mumbled over the spoon, looking up at who helped her. Koda smiled softly, nodding as he mouthed something. She didn't hear anything, but she didn't think much of it. Koda wasn't a loud person. He was very quiet, a soft-spoken kid. He looked at her shoulder, a small smile coming across his face. The rat, still perched on her shoulder, squeaked, his whiskers touching her cheek. "Sorry," she mumbled, before balancing the bowl in one hand awkwardly to take the spoon from her mouth. "Thought he would like some food. I hope cereal won't hurt him?" "Her," Koda whispered, just loud enough for her to catch. He extended a hand, and the rat leapt onto his, climbing up onto his shoulder and nuzzling against him. "Cereal is fine," he said, petting the little creature. She watched them for a second before snapping out of her tired stare. "Oh, here," she said, holding the bowl with the plate. "The food is for her." She enunciated the pronoun to show she had heard, and Koda took the plate carefully. "Thank you," he signed, taking a piece and handing it to the rat. She responded in sign language as well, nodding. "You're welcome." It was an awkward attempt with the bowl in her hand, but Koda nodded in understanding. They stood there for a second more before she nodded and moved past him, putting the spoon in the bowl and carrying it back to her room. She was going to miss the small company the rat had offered her for a second, but she really needed to work on that piece before the deadline. The next time she encountered one of her classmates' animal companions was when the same rat showed up on her desk. It was a month later, but the small ribbon around the rat's neck was the same. It squeaked, its whiskers twitching. "Oh, hello," she said, rubbing her chin as it nuzzled into her hand. "I never did ask Koda for your name, did I?" she asked as the rat squeaked again. She shifted the papers on her desk into one pile, leaning back in her seat. The rat climbed into her open palm, staying still as she picked it up. She pet it gently, looking around her room. "I don't have much for you here." She stood up slowly, putting the rat on her shoulder as it snuggled by her neck. "Let's see if I have any snacks from the last time they were here." She opened her mini fridge she had managed to bring in for late-night study sessions. They took turns hosting, and she always made sure to stock up on snacks to keep them all motivated. "Would fruit kill you?" she asked, hesitating by the grapes. She decided against it, grabbing a small pack of simple saltine crackers. Did they need to be in the fridge? No, but she didn't want to take up too much space with her snacks. And the fridge wouldn't hurt saltines. "Let me get one for you," she hummed, unclipping the pack. She took 2 out, putting one in her mouth, the other set on top of the fridge. "Hopefully one works." The rat squeaked in agreement as she stood up, sighing. "Okay then." She bit into the one in her mouth, catching the piece that fell. "Hold up." She set the crackers down, grabbing a water bottle and a small dish she had been meaning to use for a plant, but had yet to get around to it. Instead, she put it on the table and poured a bit of water out. She put the cap back on, setting it to the side as she stretched back up. "Here," she said, raising a hand to her shoulder. The rat clambered onto it, squeaking as she set it down onto her desk. It picked up the cracker, nibbling on it. "Tasty?" she asked, her response another squeak. She hummed, spreading out the papers again. "Want to hear what I've been working on?" she asked, getting another squeak in response. She laughed, nodding. "Koda's lucky to be able to understand you." She picked up her guitar from its stand, strumming a few notes as she hummed. The rat kept nibbling on the cracker as she looked down at her notes she had so far. "I don't have any lyrics yet," she clarified to the rat, who kept eating. She chuckled, going back to humming as she strummed the guitar. She tapped her foot along it as she kept going, skipping over the parts she was unsure of. She had been working on this one for only a week, and she just couldn't figure out how she wanted to change it, what instruments to add, what sounds she still needed. She finished, sighing as she stopped the vibration of the guitar strings. "What do you think?" she asked, looking down at the rat. Except it was gone, only saltine crumbs left where it had been. She frowned, setting the guitar back on its stand. "That bad, huh?" she questioned, standing up. She needed a break anyway, some fresh food from the kitchen. The squad could probably help her get her mind off things. Kyoka yawned, settling further in between Denki and the couch. He wrapped his arm around her, adjusting the blanket they had grabbed. "You still up?" she whispered, to no one in particular. When no one responded, she huffed. She tapped Denki on his side, but he didn't move, snoring silently. She stayed where she was, watching the credits run across the screen. It was late, almost midnight, and her group of friends all piled into Denki's room. They were meant to be studying, but he had put on a movie, and no one wanted to do anything else. It didn't help that he had once found some couches and used Uraraka to float them to his balcony and slide them inside. It was the perfect hangout room, even his LED lighting with the gentle blue. "Don't suppose you're awake, Bakugou?" she called out, but no one responded. As the different language credits appeared, she finally twisted out of Denki's hold. She sat up, Denki grumbled and tucked in on himself into that now empty space. Bakugou and Eijirou were awkwardly piled onto the single-seat couch Denki had. Mina had blankets piled over her, drooling slightly onto the pillow. She was just as exhausted as they were, but she couldn't fall asleep with a movie on. Any background noise made her stay wide awake, so she never got to sleep during these late nights. "Scooch," she mumbled, moving Denki's legs so she could fully stand up. She replaced the blanket over him, shutting off the TV. She picked up her binder of notes that did not get used tonight, sighing. "Night, guys," she mumbled, flicking off the light and shutting his door quietly. While they were not necessarily supposed to have sleepovers in another's room, no one was going to report them. They had all been through too much together for it to matter. Sometimes people just needed that extra comfort, and sometimes they needed to lay in bed by themselves. She hit the button for the elevator, rubbing at her eyes as it chimed. She went to step inside, but something white caught her eyes, and she paused. Koda's rat paused for only a second, its whiskers twitching in the dark nightlight. "Oh, hello," she whispered, reaching a hand out for her. The rat sniffed the air before running down the stairs, ignoring her. She cast a look at the elevator that was closing before shrugging and following the rat down. It was already nearing midnight, and she'd get in trouble for being up anyways. Might as well follow the rat. She paused as she reached the first floor, quiet voices reaching her. She plugged her jack into the wall to hear better, biting her cheek. "Do you want a mug, Izuku?" she heard someone ask. Their voice was familiar, but not to the point it was one of her classmates. She had heard the voice every once in a while at night downstairs, though. "Thank you, Hitoshi," Midoriya responded, glasses clinking in the kitchen. "Would you like some, Tokoyami?" He heard something click before someone else responded. "I am all right. Thank you for your generosity, Midoriya." She unplugged her jack, satisfied it was only those three in there. The rat walked into one of the small storage hallways, simply put there to break up the space. Kyoka followed, moving slowly to not disturb her classmates. There was a small door in the back, one she didn't even really know was here. Well, she did, but it was an emergency exit door, not to be used. "I don't think so," she whispered to the rat, but it climbed up the side, sitting on the push bar. She hesitantly took another step forward, cradling the binder under her arm. She bit her lip and gently touched the push bar. She paused, waiting. When no alarm went off, she breathed a sigh of relief, shaking her head. "Why are you trying to get me into trouble?" she asked the rat. It squeaked in response, running up her arm and onto her shoulder. She laughed quietly, slowly closing the door behind her. Being up past lights out would get her in plenty of trouble, but being outside after hours would make Ida even more upset. It was ridiculous. The patrolling robots and teachers shifting out shifts would be fine. The rat disappeared down a path, and she followed, holding the binder a little tighter. "Where'd you go?" she asked, following where it went down. She paused after a little bit, looking around the path. She knew where she was, but the darkness seemed to give it an eerie feel she didn't care for. "Little rat," she called, looking around the trees. Something moved near her, much bigger than the little rat was. She plugged her jacks into the floor, crouching down to it. Whatever was by her was big. She sent out some shockwaves, the ground moving in waves away from her. Someone shrieked, but it was quieter than most would. She stopped the shockwaves, pulling her jacks from the floor as she breathed a sigh of relief. "Koda, I'm so sorry," she said, reaching for the boy who was amongst the trees. He took her hand, rubbing his head as she strained to pull him to his feet. "All right," he whispered, smiling. The little white rat peeked out from his shoulder, squeaking loudly. "Oh, hello," she greeted the rat again, reaching a hand out. It jumped onto her hand, holding it gently. "What's her name, Koda?" He hesitated, looking down at the floor as a bird came over and settled on his head. "I know some signs if it's easier for you," she offered. He looked surprised before smiling softly and nodding. "Sit?" he asked in sign, simply. She nodded, taking a seat by one of the trees. Koda sat beside her, taking the bird from his head and petting it gently. "Are we even meant to be out here?" He shook his head, smiling at her as the bird cozied up to him. "Bandit," he signed. "Huh?" Koda pointed to the rat Kyoka was petting, signing again. "Her name is Bandit." "Ah," Kyoka said with a laugh. "Why'd you choose that name?" "A nickname," Koda said, slowly. "Her name is—" He paused, shaking his head. "I cannot sign it. It's hard to pronounce." Kyoka hummed as the rat, Bandit, nuzzled against her cheek. "Are all animal names like that?" Koda nodded, chuckling very quietly. "Vocal cords are different," he explained, touching his neck gently. Kyoka nodded, laughing. "Hi, little Bandit," she whispered, rubbing under the rat's chin. "Do you come out here often?" Koda paused before nodding. "Yes, it's nice at night." He stopped signing, picking back up the bird he had set on his lap. He vaguely motioned to his ears, and she nodded. She plugged her jack into the floor beside them, the noises immediately amplifying. "Is this what you wanted?" she asked quietly. He nodded, chuckling as well. "Why?" "My hands can get tired easily," he said, just loud enough for her to hear with her ear jack plugged in. She didn't show her surprise at fully hearing his voice, leaning back against the tree. She was curious why he wanted to speak or why he talked so quietly, but she didn't ask. Has Ida found out you come out here? Koda laughed slightly, shaking his head. No, the animals help me steer clear of him. She laughed, letting it fall into a quiet silence as a small rabbit hopped over to him. He petted gently, humming as the bird hopped back onto his head and the rabbit curled into his lap. Bandit stayed in her hand, chittering softly. How do you know sign? Koda asked quietly, not looking over at her. He hadn't made eye contact with her since she had sat down beside him. She hummed, looking up towards the starless sky. My mom, she responded. Her concerts had moments we couldn't speak. It was loud, busy, quiet, whatever. So she taught me basic sign. She paused, setting down Bandit into her lap. I know every instrument and many musical notions. She grinned, tipping her head. Do you need a guitar now? She signed, getting another small chuckle from him. She picked back up Bandit, who nuzzled into her hand, laying down. He likes you, he said, looking at the rat. Kyoka grinned, petting her head slowly. I'm glad. She may not be the best at helping with my music, but she's good company. Koda chuckled again, leaning back against the trees as he shut his eyes. Kyoka studied him in the lamplight, the way that he had 4 different animals now snuggled against him. He was a large person, but sitting beside the tree he felt small, more approachable than he had in the loud environment of training. She leaned back against the tree as well, leaving her jack plugged in if he wanted to talk again. She shut her eyes, humming the song she had been working on quietly, mixing her voice to the animals and nature around. It was peaceful. Hey, Koda, she waved at the boy, happily meeting him in the corner he had situated himself. His eyes widened as he looked at her, raising a hand in greeting. Partners? He signed. She laughed, nodding. Yeah, looks like that's the way Sensei assigned us. Were you not listening? His face flushed, something she wasn't actually aware was fully possible, as he gazed right off to the side of her face. Bandit was talking, he said, opening his jacket to reveal the little rat situated in an interior pocket. Kyoka gasped in surprise, holding a hand out as she jumped into it. I thought you weren't even supposed to have her in the dorms. Why'd you bring her out? Snuck in, Koda said, looking down at the jacket pocket. Kyoka laughed, nuzzling the rat before looking back at him. Here she is, she said, moving to put Bandit back in the pocket. She ran up her arm, sitting by her ear with a loud squeak. You're going to get caught, she said, getting another squeak as a response. Koda chuckled slightly, looking at Bandit. She's sneaky, he signed, and she laughed, but gave up on giving the little rat back. We're going third if you want to come watch, she offered, gesturing to the group crowded around the best camera scene. Koda's eyes went wide as he shook his head. I'm all right, he signed. She frowned, watching the group talk. They could use the information from the matches before theirs, but she didn't want to leave him on his own in the corner. Oh, hold on, she said, digging into her pockets. She opened her messages and hit Mina's image. It took 2 rings before she picked up the voice call, a very confused look on her face. Hold the camera to the video? Kyoka asked. Why not just come over here, girlie? Mina asked, looking over at them. Kyoka raised an eyebrow and her friend sighed. All right, give me a minute. The camera shifted and rotated, changing where it was before finally settling in view of the screen. Kyoka silently cheered, nodding. Thanks, girl, she yelled, putting herself on mute to avoid the interference. Here, she said, sitting down on the floor. Koda hesitantly followed, sitting beside her, though there was a gap between them. Kyoka didn't fill it, resting her elbow on her leg as she held the phone between them. Thank you, Koda signed. Anytime, Kyoka said with a grin, turning up her brightness. They were going to rock this assignment. That did not go well, she muttered, rubbing her eyes. Koda nodded in agreement, petting Bandit. Bakugou and Sero are hard to beat, he whispered. She had just gotten used to plugging in her jacks when around him. She nodded, passing over some snacks she had brought. They didn't need to be that rough, though, she countered, looking over at him. He had somehow gotten the worst of Bakugou's blast, his arm completely bandaged up. Recovery Girl had said that it wouldn't leave burn scars, but she hadn't fixed him up. Something about him being exhausted enough. He shrugged, swallowing the food in his mouth. Most people are. He didn't expand on that, rubbing at the back of his hand. Kyoka could see faint scars in the harsh hallway light, shining off the raised edges. She looked away, Bandit jumping over to her lap instead. "How'd you find her?" she asked, rubbing under Bandit's chin. "In an alley," he whispered. She had been caught in a glue trap. Her back legs didn't work. She was scared, confused. He paused, looking down at the little rat who curled into Kyoka's hand. She needed me as much as I needed her. Kyoka hummed, leaning back against the wall. "I'm glad you found her." She smiled, shutting her eyes. "So am I," he said, letting it fall back into silence. It was faint, a small touch, almost imperceptible. Koda's arm rested against hers, his skin cold on hers. She didn't move from the touch, allowing him that level of comfort. It was the first time he had touched her since they started meeting. "Did you hear what Monoma did?" Denki asked, bouncing on the balls of his feet as they walked. "I heard Vlad sent him straight to Nezu." Bakugou laughed, a deep sound. Many mistook it for an angry growl, but she had been around him long enough to know better. "Fucking prick deserved it. Trying to pick a fight with the damn extras." "Shinso is not an extra," Eijirou said, shouldering him. "Though Monoma totally deserved that. Shinso was pretty manly," he exclaimed, holding an arm up to show off his muscles. Kyoka joined in on the laughter as they walked towards the dorms. Her friends were loud, but they were great company. She paused as a sound caught her attention, off in the trees nearby. She crouched, placing an ear in the soft floor as her friends continued on. She heard the footsteps stop, Mina walking up to her. "You good, girl?" she asked, tapping her shoulder. Kyoka nodded, searching for the sound again. "I'm all right," she responded quietly. "I'll catch up later." Mina's hand hesitated on her back as Kyoka shut her eyes to better visualize around her. "Okay then," she finally said, taking her hand off. "We'll be up in Denki's room." She walked off, and Kyoka could hear them leave the area. She focused her attention on all the trees in front of her. The sound came again, a light cooing. Something sounded off about it, not like a normal bird would. It was higher than any bird she had heard, more broken. She tightened her eyes, the sound coming once more. "Found you," she whispered, unplugging her jack and slowly standing up. She moved slowly, careful not to be too loud. The bird sounded in distress, its heartbeat getting louder as she replugged her jack, trying to make sure it hadn't moved. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, stepping near it. The black bird freaked out, beating a limp wing against the floor as it tried to hop away. Its coos were terrified, blood dripping onto the floor from its wing. "You're okay," she tried, crouching near it. It freaked out as she went to touch it, pecking at her finger. As it fluttered, its wing continued to hit the ground, leaves getting pulled onto the wet blood. She bit her lip, trying to figure out how to not freak out the bird more. Her own fingers were now bleeding because it had managed to pick off some skin, making her hands sting. It was going to hurt itself more if she kept trying to protect itself from her. She grabbed it quickly, trying to ignore the fact she could feel its fast heartbeat. She held its wings to its side, standing up quickly as she cradled it as close to her chest as she could manage. It screamed, pecking at her shirt as it tried to escape. "I'm sorry, little bird," she whispered, speed walking with it. She didn't want to risk running and hurting it more, but she had to get it help. She ignored the elevator, moving up the steps 2 at a time as she ignored someone calling to her. She finally made it to his room, kicking it since her hands were full. "Koda!" she called loudly, still trying to comfort the bird which had ripped through her shirt. Koda threw open the door, a bird already seated on his head. He took one look at her and the screaming bird in her arms and guided her inside, shutting the door quickly. "Calm," he said, louder than she had heard him before. "You're okay. We're friends. Nestmates." The bird calmed slightly, but Kyoka could still feel its heart racing as it cooed in fear. "Its claws are stuck in my shirt," she said softly, keeping it to her chest so it didn't hurt itself. Koda nodded, hesitating slightly before reaching forward and taking its feet. She could feel him bristle slightly when he touched her hand. Calm. You're hurt. Scared. We won't hurt you. We want to help. The bird let out more coos in response. I can't understand when you talk like that, he said, but managed to get the bird's claws out of her shirt. I had left holes throughout it, but she ignored them, handing over the bird. What can I do? She asked, as he took it gently and moved it to a small setup on his desk. I have some cream on my nightstand, he said. Band-aids and the scissors as well, please. She nodded, opening the top drawer and pulling out the requested items. There was a photo of his family on the top as well, but she moved it aside to grab the Band-aids. Here, she said, handing it back to him. He nodded, taking them as he gently rubbed the bird's head. You're okay. We're nestmates. He said something so low, so broken, that it almost hurt her head to hear it. A sound she didn't think she could pronounce, but he said it with such care. You're okay. The bird calmed down, no longer sounding as terrified. It gently hit his hand, and he smiled, breathing a sigh of relief. The bird cooed again, pecking at his hand gently and looking over his hand towards her. A friend, he said, matching her gaze. She stared in surprise at his eyes before she finally looked away and he turned back to the bird. Kyoka, can you get some food? He asked, softer. She nodded, looking around the room with the many different animals set up surround. Where? Bandit chose that moment to run at her, squeaking beside her on the bed. She'll show you, he said, unwrapping some bandage. Kyoka followed Bandit and let Koda work, opening the bottom drawer that Bandit squeaked at. There was a large bag of birdseed, as well as multiple smaller ones. She took one of the smaller containers, scooping some of the birdseed into it. Bandit squeaked and moved to stand beside one of the smaller bags, looking at her expectantly. She hesitantly dumped out some of the birdseed until Bandit gave her another squeak. She filled the rest with the small round seeds from the smaller bag, Bandit jumping onto her shoulder. She carried it back to Koda, the bird's wing wrapped up carefully and held to its side. Here, she said, handing it to the boy. Thank you, he said, almost back to his whispering as he gave the bird the food. Eat. It will help you, he said to the creature, getting another coo in response. As the bird started eating, Koda stood up, rubbing at his hands, looking over at her. She sighed in her own relief, sitting back on his bed as she rubbed her eyes. Thank you for helping her. I didn't know what else to do. He sat beside her, closer than he had once chosen to sit, nodding and watching the bird. She got hit by a rock. She went to plug in her jack until she noticed that she didn't need to. He was speaking loud enough for her to hear. Some kid probably didn't even know she was there and used their quirk. She blocked it from hitting her nest. Kyoka nodded, tucking her legs up to her chest. You got all that from her coos. Koda shrugged, smiling slightly. Many animals don't need words. Humans need the most. But you can't understand them half the time, she whispered. Koda nodded, copying her position on the bed. You know, she started. Koda asked, looking right over her shoulder again. She chuckled, resting her head on her knees to look at him better. For someone with such a hard exterior, you're pretty soft, aren't you? He looked back at the bird who was eating, smiling slightly. My mama says the same thing. She says I need to get harder to match the genetic mutation she gave me. Nah, Kyoka cut in. He looked over at her, still not quite eye contact. No reason to change. I like you how you are. He turned away from her, tucking his face into his knees. She grinned slightly when his cheeks flushed red, even from where he had tried to hide them. The room fell into silence, and when he didn't speak again, her stomach dropped. She didn't mean it in a flirty way, but maybe he had really taken it that way. She flirted with her friends all the time, but she didn't mean any of it. She had really messed up. Thank you, he whispered, so quietly she had to lip-read it more than hear it. She sighed, nodding. Of course. You're a sweet person. I am glad I got to know you better because of Bandit. The little rat crawled down her arm at her name, sitting on her knee instead. She pet under its chin, feeling the way it almost purred like a cat. "You are nice too," Koda said, messing with his hands. "As a friend," he quickly added. She nodded, picking up Bandit to stretch out her legs. "She'll be all right?" Kyoka asked, nodding to the bird, who was now just watching them. The bowl of food was only halfway empty, but she didn't seem to be eating anymore. Koda nodded, standing up quickly and moving to the bird. "I have a spare nest you would like," he said to the bird, holding a palm out. The bird looked at it hesitantly before cooing and stepping onto it. Koda did not hesitate, even as she could see the scarred bird grip into his hand, dots of red on his palm. She looked down at her own hands, peck marks and cuts all over them. Her shirt was still ripped at the very top as well. "Hey, Koda," she asked, as he opened the door to the balcony. She watched a rabbit hop out of the way of the swinging door, following him onto the balcony. She followed him out as well, running her fingers along the chicken wire between the posts. The balcony was a mix of different cages and enclosures, plants growing in one corner. There was a single beanbag set up as well, facing out onto the woods. She didn't try to get his attention again, letting him crack open a cage. The bird cooed louder, and Koda hesitated. "You are okay. It will keep you safe from larger birds while your wing tries to heal. If you want to leave, you can open this." He set the bird inside, moving the latch on the inside slowly. "It is simple." The bird hesitated before bobbing and moving to the nest in the back of the lifted enclosure, ruffling her feathers on one wing as she lay down. Kyoka shut the door, once again showing her the lock, before he turned to Kyoka. "Yes?" he asked. She startled slightly, enthralled at watching him interact with the animal. "Sorry, do you possibly have any bandages for humans?" She lifted her hands to show him the marks. She was a bit scared. Koda's eyes went wide as he nodded and rushed inside. Kyoka followed, shutting the door to the balcony. The rabbit hopped through the small cat door at the bottom, hopping over to a small cage. She watched it settle down, a celery stick held in its paws. "Do they hurt?" Koda asked, taking her hand suddenly. She didn't pull back as he ran his fingers over the small cuts, his calloused hands rough even on her own hands. "Not really, just a little sting," she responded as he started to rub some cream on them. "Her bites aren't infectious, but they will take a bit to heal on their own," he said as he put band-aids over them. She smiled at all the small animals over each band-aid. As he finished, she turned to grab his hand gently. He flinched slightly but didn't pull away as she turned them around. "Your own hands are cut," she commented, looking at where the bird's talons had dug in. The palms of his hands were less scarred than the back, but she could guess that was just because the calluses were covering them. "It happens," he said with a shrug. "Some animals defend themselves more than others. They always heal on their own." She nodded in understanding, leading him over to his bed again as she kept the hold on his hands. "I understand that, but you should still take care of them." She took the cream from his other hand and repeated the same procedure he had just done on her. As she put the last band-aid on, she looked up to find him staring directly at her. Her breath caught in her throat as he smiled. "Thank you." He didn't pull out of her touch and didn't look away, holding her gaze. She was the one to break eye contact, letting go of his hand and standing up. "I have to go catch up with Bakugou and them," she said quickly. "I told them I'd meet back up with them when I heard her in trouble." She looked out towards the balcony to avoid looking at the boy beside her. "Okay," he said quietly. "Thank you," he said again. "Anytime," she responded quickly, moving to his door. Bandit squeaked from where she was now on the bed, and Kyoka waved, leaving his room quickly. She shut the door, her heart beating way too loudly in her chest. What the heck? She had had crushes before. She knew what they felt like and how awful they were to deal with. She could understand liking someone like Midoriya, or even Denki, but it's not like she'd ever looked twice at Koda before. She knew he was strong. He'd carried her before in his arms. She could feel her face flush as she shook away the memory and turned to Denki's room. She needed to get her thoughts as far away from this as possible, because if she actually did have feelings for the quietest boy in class, she then had to come to terms with that, and she didn't want to make things awkward around them, not when they were going so well. "Finally!" Mina screamed from the couch as Kyoka opened the door to Denki's room. She blinked in surprise at the sudden outburst from her friend before sighing in relief. What's up? You look exhausted. Kyoka didn't say anything, flopping down on top of her friend. Mina laughed, but did not question it more, resting a hand on Kyoka's head as they kept talking about the board game they were playing. Kyoka paused her music, pulling her headphones down over her neck. The quiet noise came from her door again, barely louder than her fan. She pushed away from her desk, rolling over to the door and cracking it open. Koda stared back at her, his fist raised as if to knock again. He quickly put his hand down, his face slightly red. "Hello," he said, smiling. She grinned and moved back, holding open the door for him. "What's up, Koda?" She rolled back to her bed, watching him walk in. He hesitated, leaving the door open as Bandit immediately jumped to her bed, then to her chair. He paused, biting his cheek. "Bandit was telling me about your music, and I was wondering if I could hear it." He messed with his hands, rubbing them together. She shrugged, petting the little rat. "Sure, go ahead and shut the door on your way in. Manada's always trying to sneak in." She shivered slightly at the thought of her smallest classmate. He constantly gave her crap for her flat chest, and yet always tried to steal her underwear. It was nasty. Koda nodded and shut the door, standing by the bed. "Sorry about intruding. I was just in my room, and you're always the one to come to me, and—" "Dude," she cut in as his speech got faster and quieter. "You're good. It's nice to see you again." She grabbed her laptop, unplugging everything she had connected, putting it in her lap and rolling back to her bed. Koda nodded, sitting right on the edge of her bed, catching Bandit as she leapt from Kyoka. "You too," he said quietly, smiling. She grinned back, nodding. The time between when they saw each other had gotten shorter over the past month. Whether Koda would spend more time downstairs with the whole class, or Kyoka meeting him outside when her brain wandered. It was nice to have that sort of escape from her loud and overbearing friends. She loved them, but this was nice. "Okay, so I don't really know if this is your style." She transferred to her bed, purposely leaving plenty of room between them. Koda took the hint and moved further back onto her bed to see her screen. "Okay, so I don't really know if this is your style." She transferred to her bed, purposely leaving plenty of room between them. Koda took the hint and moved further back onto her bed to see her screen. "Also, the lyrics aren't done yet. Hell, I might even change some of the sounds. It's just not clicking." Koda nodded in understanding, petting Bandit gently. "Music is very subjective. Maybe some fresh ears will help." She nodded, moving to plug in her jack before she realized something. She didn't even have it plugged in to hear him. Sure, it had happened before, but most times they talked a bit in sign first. Or he was very quiet and then got louder. But he was simply loud enough for her to hear. Almost as loud as any other student. She shook her head, ignoring the thought, even though it made her smile. "Don't, be too harsh. Again, it's still in progress." He smiled and nodded, so she shut her eyes and hit play. As the sound grew, she leaned back, turning to watch his face as he watched the sound waves on the computer. His hand tapped along to it, and even Bandit seemed sort of interested, sniffing towards her computer. She tried to ignore every flaw she could hear, or gap in the sound, as they listened through the entirety. It wasn't her best work, definitely not something she wanted to show a friend. A crush. She had come to accept that. It was weird. She had never thought she'd be attracted to someone with a mutant-type quirk. Not that there was anything wrong with it, she just never had been before. But Koda was actually kind of cute. It was hard to see how no one in their class had seen it. His blush was more prominent, and his large hands were insanely strong, not to mention his personality. Even him showing up here, it meant a lot to her, and she couldn't deny the way her heart was beating way too fast. The music ended, and it took her a second to realize, looking away from him as she frantically paused it before something else could play. "What do you think?" she asked, not looking up at him. "I like it," he said, Bandit squeaking in what she thought was agreement. "The backing sound over that part around halfway kinda reminds me of the night sounds, the wind and the small steps of animals." She relaxed slightly, nodding. "I was kind of inspired by our late nights, but—" She hesitated as Bandit put a paw on her leg. "Well, I didn't want to put any actual animal sounds. I tried to mimic them with my instruments for the softer feel." Koda nodded, still looking at the screen. I like it. I can listen to it without the words getting in the way. And you made it sound very beautiful. I can see why you enjoy being outside even when you can't hear them, he rambled. She listened to every word, nodding as she pet Bandit's head. I wanted you to be able to hear it, she said truthfully. He blushed slightly, looking away from the screen. She stuttered, quickly trying to correct herself. I didn't mean it like that. I mean, why would I make music people can't listen to? I like it, he cut her off before she could spiral. All of it, not just the quieter part. She nodded, taking a deep breath. What kind of music do you usually listen to? She asked, looking over at him. His face flushed again as he rubbed at his neck. I listen to everything, but his voice dipped lower. Punk is my current favorite at the moment. She stared at him in shock before laughing and shouldering him slightly. That's a good one. Any artist in particular? She grinned as his face flushed, and he shook his head. No, the animals don't tend to like it. Bandit pushed against his hand, and he chuckled. Except Bandit. Course, Kyoka said, setting her computer into her rolly chair. It's always the quiet people. Koda laughed, genuinely laughed, filling her room with the sound. She looked away, flopping back onto the bed with a sigh. Can I ask you a question? He looked back at her, his lips twitching into a small smile. You just did. She stared at him before grabbing a pillow and throwing it. He easily caught it, holding it to his chest as he pulled his legs onto the bed. That's not what I meant, and you know it. He nodded, Bandit crawling up onto his shoulder. What do you want to know? I mean, feel free to not tell me, she started. But why are you so quiet all the time? Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I feel like you know a lot. Originally, I thought maybe you couldn't speak loudly, but you do, and it's nice to hear. Koda nodded, biting his lip as he fell into silence. Animals are easier, he finally said. But growing up, they were all I had. People don't really... He hesitated, looking around the room. They don't like people who look like me. He gestured to himself before messing with his hands. I guess it just got easier to speak to only animals. Kyoka nodded, looking up at the ceiling. That sounds like it sucked. She took a deep breath, shutting her eyes. I'm glad we got to be friends. You don't have to worry about any of that around me, okay? She looked over to find him staring directly at her. He quickly averted his eyes, nodding. Thank you, he whispered. It's different. Different good? She tried to clarify, sitting up. He nodded. Different good. I have friends in class, like Midoriya. But you? He shrugged. I like spending time with you. Her heart leapt in her chest, and she fought to keep it down as she punched his shoulder in a friendly move. I like hanging out with you too, she said. The room fell back into the easy silence as she yawned, standing up. Want to watch a movie? Hypothetically, she started, her friends glancing over at her. How would I act around a crush? Mina shot up, a wide grin splitting her face. Hypothetically, she yelled quickly. Mina giggled, propping her head onto her hands as she leaned on Denki. Who is it? She teased in a sing-song voice. Kyoka glared at her, which made her laugh more, pushing her elbows into Denki. Denki shoved her off, but matched her pose on the arm of the couch. Well, in this hypothetical. Anyways, is it someone in this room? He wiggled his eyebrows, clearly joking. Kyoka groaned, burying her face in her hands. I shouldn't have said anything, she muttered. Eijirou laughed, adjusting where he was sitting, practically cuddled next to Bakugou on the single chair. Well, do you really like him, or is it more in a dude bro kind of way? He asked. She hesitated, biting her cheek. I like him. They make me happy, and it's not how you guys do. It's an actual crush. Stop being a coward and just tell them, Bakugou said, shrugging. Eijirou raised an eyebrow at the blonde, who matched him with a glare. Bro, it literally took me months to make you understand I liked you. You are possibly the worst person to ask about these things. Bakugou scowled, his face tightening. I don't know what you mean. Dun's face is worse than me. Hey, Denki yelled, looking away from Kyoka. I tell my crushes when I like them. I flirt. Bro, you flirt with everyone. He huffed, crossing his arms. I just got a lot of love to give. Well, Mina dragged the word out, getting everyone's attention. We can't exactly tell you if we don't know who it is. Kyoka sighed, shaking her head. I'm not telling you guys anything, she said again. Mina threw her arms up defensively. I'm just saying, it all depends on the person and the personality. I mean, someone like Midoriya, you have to be direct. She paused before quickly adding, he's off the table though. Uraraka already called him. Pretty sure he has a crush on Shinso, Kyoka countered. Denki's face fell as he shook his head. I called that one. Dude code. Mina slapped him on the back of the head. Doesn't count if they're both dudes. Plus, we don't even know if Shinso is gay. Kyoka hummed in agreement, watching her friends. Midoriya and Shinso were totally together. She had heard more than enough from them in the kitchens to know they liked each other. They were just oblivious. But that wasn't her place to say. Okay, not Midoriya, she said, getting back on track. It's not him. Well, is it even a dude? Eijirou asked. Could be a chick. You know, Mina pointed out, you did have a thing for Momo, right? Denki laughed. Who doesn't have a thing for her? Eijirou raised a hand, and Bakugou grumbled, taking the redhead's hand and putting it down. Is it her? Wow, Bakugou, you're really into this. Shut up, he barked. Just trying to help. Kyoka laughed, but shook her head. No, not her. Well, I do like her. Pretty sure she doesn't like girls in that way. So, it's a dude, Eijirou tried to clarify. Kyoka huffed. Look, it doesn't matter who it is. Just help me figure out how to tell them, or if I even should, she pleaded. Denki grabbed Mina's arm, whispering something in her ear. Her eyes went wide as she stared at Kyoka, a grin breaking out across her face. Is it Koda? She teased, drawing the word out. Kyoka looked away from her for a split second, and the room descended into chaos. Holy shit, Denki screamed. I was just playing. Is it really Koda? Animal face? Bakugou asked loudly. Why that fucker? Mina squealed in delight, kicking her feet. Holy crap, Kyoka, you fell for the boy? That's manly as hell, dude, Eijirou yelled into the noise of laughter and chaos. Kyoka groaned, burying her face into her hands as she shook her head. Shut up, she muttered. Mina bounced over to her and grabbed her shoulders, laughing. Is this why you've been leaving us more often? Dude, that's exactly why, Denki shouted, flopping back onto the now empty couch. And why you've been randomly obsessed with animals. I have not, Kyoka countered. Yes, you have, Eijirou chimed in. All those books on different birds from the library. Kyoka buried her face more in her hands as Mina laughed behind her. Just fucking tell him, Bakugou said. Stop being a coward. But how? Kyoka asked, pleading with the only reasonable person in the room. Mina stopped her cackling long enough to flop back onto the couch on top of Denki. I don't know. That boy's probably too quiet for that. He is very quiet, Denki agreed. I don't think I've ever heard him speak. She nodded. He's shy, she admitted, but he's nice and strong, and he's really smart. Mina laughed, nodding. He is higher in the class rating than most, she hummed. Honestly, he's a good choice. Not for me, she quickly added. Denki nodded. Yeah, I can see that, I guess. But why don't you just flirt with him? See if he likes you? Kyoka can't flirt for the life of her, Eijirou pointed out. Did you see her with Momo before she gave up? Bakugou huffed out a laugh as Kyoka groaned. No. She drew the word out, burying her face in her hands. That was a while ago. Still, Bakugou said, you can't flirt. The room fell into silence as people tried to think of something, her face growing increasingly red. I have it, Mina yelled. Kyoka looked up to see her grinning widely. You let us plan it. A whole romantic scene with animals and everything for Koda. Kyoka groaned, putting her face back in her hands. But why not? I think it's a good idea, Denki asked. Yeah, Eijirou yelled. That'd be so manly. Bakugou chimed in. I can keep the fuck faces from going too far. Kyoka stared at her friend, who shrugged, Eijirou grinning at him proudly. Okay, she finally agreed. Okay, if you guys can keep it toned down, he doesn't like people, or anything overstimulating. Mina nodded excitedly, turning to talk with Denki. Kyoka looked over to the couple, who also talked to each other, with smiles on every face. She couldn't help but feel like she just made a deal with the devil. "You're scaring me, Jirou," Koda said with a slight chuckle. Kyoka nodded awkwardly, laughing. "I'm a little scared myself," she muttered. He looked over at her confused. "It's just something for the class," she lied. Koda nodded hesitantly, looking around. "Are there going to be a lot of people?" She hesitated, biting her cheek. She didn't know what exactly the group had planned with them. I don't think so," she said honestly. Koda nodded, pushing his arm up against Kyoka. She went to open the door before pausing. She could already hear sounds of some cheesy English love song from inside. "Are we going in?" Koda asked softly. She took her hand off, shaking her head. "I've changed my mind." He looked extremely confused as she took his arm gently, pausing for a second. When he didn't pull away, she led him away from the door to the dorms, and instead into the trees in the surrounding area. "I thought it was a class thing," he said. She hummed, sitting down on the bench. "Yes and no," she admitted. "Look, I need to talk to you." He frowned, sitting beside her. She noticed his genuine try to make eye contact, so she held his gaze, sighing. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I like you, Koda," she said quickly, before she could doubt herself. He blinked in surprise at her, his face contorting. "Well, I like you too. I thought I already told you." She shook her head. "No, not like that. Like Midoriya or anyone. Not as a friend." She paused, turning to face him. "I like you, Koda. Possibly romantically." "Oh," he said softly, finally breaking eye contact to look down at his hands. He didn't speak for a while, and she could feel her heart getting louder, her hands shaking. "I understand if you don't feel the same," she said quickly, unable to sit in the silence she usually enjoyed with him. "I mean, I'm just throwing this on you, and I know with your past. I mean, to even tell you this is such a big thing, but I don't mean it like that. I just mean it's okay if you don't feel the same. I won't get upset or anything. I just really wanted to tell you. I like your smile and the way you can make someone feel seen, even slightly. The care you have for the animals, the way you listen truthfully. And you're honest and strong. But, I mean, I don't like you 'cause you're strong. We're heroes in training. We're all strong, but you're..." He put his hand on hers, and she immediately quieted, staring at their hands. "I don't know," Koda said quietly. She could still hear him, but it was quieter than he had been in the past while. "Don't know?" she whispered. He nodded. "How I feel. Relationships are new to me, even friendships." He rubbed his thumb over her hand absent-mindedly, and her heart skipped beats. "I like you. Maybe more than a friend. It's different than with Midoriya or the others. But I don't know if that's what you mean." He got faster as he spoke, his words muffling into one quiet mumbling. She tightened her hand around his, and he stopped. "Breathe," she said softly. He did so, his chest rising and falling as he nodded. "It's okay if you don't know. Relationships are weird." He laughed slightly, nodding as he cracked his knuckles on one hand. The motion seemed to calm him whenever he was stressed, so she didn't mind too much. "They are," he agreed. "We don't need to be anything more than friends. I don't want us to stop being friends," she explained. "But I felt selfish not telling you how I felt. You had a right to know." He nodded, picking up her hand as his calloused fingers ran over the top of it. "Okay, I'll need time, and you can have it," she said, leaning back. "As much as you need." She jumped slightly as Bandit jumped onto her lap, squeaking loudly. She went to pet the little rat, but she snapped at her finger, her squeaking growing louder. Koda laughed slightly, picking up Bandit and letting go of Kyoka's hand. She felt the loss of warmth, but tried not to let it show as Koda held the rat. "It is all right. She didn't do anything," he told the little rat who squeaked back. "I'll go," Kyoka decided, standing up. She'd clearly upset Koda if Bandit had come to his rescue. He grabbed her hand quickly, holding it softly. "Don't," he whispered. She stared at his soft face as he held her gaze, his hand so warm on hers. She nodded, sitting back down as Bandit came and squeaked, sitting back on her lap. "What did she say?" Koda laughed slightly. "I don't, he hesitated. Little naked skin baby, he said, smiling. She looked at Bandit in shock, who nodded happily and curled up on her thigh. Is that a good thing? She asked, looking back at Koda. He nodded. The closest word is... He paused, rubbing his thumb over her hand again. Beautiful, or cute. Her breath caught in her throat as she cleared it, looking away. Skin baby is a strange way to say that. Koda laughed, a sound so rich she wished she could trap it. I'm sorry I don't have an answer, he said, looking at Bandit. Just give me time. She nodded, hesitantly leaning over. He didn't move, so she rested her head on his shoulder, shutting her eyes. He didn't let go of her hand, letting the silence hold between them. She didn't care how long it took. She was fine if it was a mild teenager crush, as long as she could save this memory for as much time as they all had. Time was all they had. Oh, alright, so this wraps up, what is this, a Bandit to Join 2 is what it's called? Yeah, Bandit to Join 2. Apparently this was the second work in my Rare Pair challenge. I'm so excited to do the next one, and I have them like lined up, but I just don't know which one to do next. This will be a longer video, so I do apologize for that. I don't know what else there is to say. I didn't include their final... Maybe I did. Maybe that was... No, because their final was when they were paired together, right? And this is when they're still in 1A, not 2A? I don't know. This one, I really like this one. I just like these two. I found them cute as I was writing them. I did not mean for it to be 10,000 words. I don't really have much else to say, so I'm gonna wrap this up here. I know it's off of my usual schedule because I have those 2 a week. I might start throwing more in, I might not, we'll see. I did ask another author if I could actually podfic their work, which I am excited to hear back from them, but I'm also like hesitant because, you know, I've declined a few podfickers in my time, but I've always declined like the AI ones. I think everyone who's asked me, who's like shown genuine interest in my work, I've allowed them to. That's actually how I started podficking. If you don't know, Echo Rainstorm was the first one to ask me if they could podfic, and that was for my Heroes and Hidden work. And then Lovegood, Luna Lovegood, I think it's Luna Lovegood, I don't, they did my Ghostly Bonds work. So I had 2 people podficking my own work, so I'm like, you know what, might as well get the rest of it done. And so I ended up like joining this whole podfickers thing. Anyways, I gotta go and edit this one, so I will post it as soon as I have it edited. Have a good one.